The last thing I ever wanted to smell was lavender. I was lying flat on my back in my own bed, staring up at the white plaster swirls on the ceiling. I wanted to move my hand, to turn my head just an inch, or to feel the cool cotton sheets under my fingers. But my body refused to listen. It felt like heavy wet cement had filled my veins and dried solid. My arms lay beside me like useless logs. Every breath was a struggle, a tiny gasp for air that did not feel like enough to keep me from suffocating. The tea. It had to be the tea. Only an hour ago, Colson had walked into our master bedroom holding a hand-painted ceramic mug. He had that warm, gentle smile, the one that made his blue eyes crinkle at the corners, the one that had made me feel safe for the 5 years we had spent together. He handed me the mug and told me I looked tired. He brushed a warm hand over my cheek and whispered that the chamomile and lavender blend would help me sleep away the stress. I trusted him completely. I smiled, blew away the steam, and drank every single drop. Now I was a prisoner inside my own skin. Through the wide open double doors of our bedroom, the bright hallway light cut into the room, reflecting off the polished hardwood floor. Colson stood by the linen closet, packing a brown leather suitcase with terrifying, chilling calmness. He folded his crisp white dress shirts one by one, smoothing out the tiny wrinkles with his palms before placing them gently inside. He looked like a man preparing for a routine business trip, not a husband who had just poisoned his wife. Then, the heavy front door downstairs clicked. Soft, familiar footsteps came up the stairs. It was Adalee. She walked into our bedroom, her bright blonde hair swinging against her shoulders. She didn't look at me. She walked straight past the foot of the bed, treating me like a piece of old, dusty furniture. She opened my wardrobe, her green eyes scanning my hanging clothes, and pulled out my favorite gray cashmere coat, the one Colson had bought me for our first anniversary. Adalee slid her arms into the sleeves, wrapped it tightly around her waist, and stood in front of the long vanity mirror, tilting her head from side to side. "It fits perfectly," she said. Her voice was light and cheerful. Colson didn't stop folding his shirts. He said, "Take whatever you want." His voice was flat, completely empty of emotion. "Just hurry up. We don't have much time before the private plane leaves." "Should we put the rest of her jewelry in the garage?" Adalee asked, tracing the silver buttons of my coat. "No," Colson replied, closing the lid of the leather bag. "Leave it. The police will expect things to look normal tomorrow. Just a tragic, accidental overdose on her sleeping pills. If we take too much, it looks like a robbery." I tried to scream. I gathered every ounce of strength left in my fading mind, trying to force the sound out of my throat, trying to rip through the invisible chains holding me down. But nothing came out, not a whimper. I was completely locked inside my own dying brain, forced to watch my husband and my best friend plan my funeral. Colson zipped his suitcase with a sharp, final sound and walked over to my side of the bed. He bent down so close that I could smell the expensive cedarwood cologne he always wore. He brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. His fingers felt like dry ice against my skin. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. His lips were dry and cold. "Sleep tight, Leyla," he whispered. He turned, picked up his suitcase, and walked out. Adalee followed close behind, her hand trailing along the wooden door frame without looking back. Then the heavy oak door slid shut. I heard the key slide into the lock and the sharp click of the bolt sliding into place. They locked me in to die alone in the dark. My eyes slowly closed as the drug took its final hold. The dark shadows in the corners of the room spread out, creeping across the ceiling until they swallowed everything. My heart took one last, weak, fluttering beat, and then there was nothing but cold, heavy silence. Gasp! I bolted upright, my chest expanding so fast it felt like my ribs were going to crack open. I sucked in a massive, freezing breath of air, my lungs burning as if I had been underwater for minutes. My hands flew to my neck, my fingers clawing at the throat, searching for the tightness of the poison. I was shaking so violently that my elbows knocked against the hard surface underneath me. My breath came in short, ragged gasps that echoed off the walls. But there was no dark bedroom. There was no locked door. I was sitting on a high brass bar stool in my own kitchen. The bright morning sun was streaming through the massive, floor-to-ceiling glass windows, hitting the white marble of the kitchen island. The house smelled of fresh white paint, clean laundry, and lavender soap. I looked down at my hands. They were smooth and warm, full of life. I wasn't wearing my pajamas. I was wearing a clean white linen blouse and my favorite blue jeans. Screech! A loud, piercing noise shattered the quiet morning. On the professional-grade stove, a silver kettle was boiling, sending a thick cloud of white steam towards the ceiling. I scrambled off the stool, my knees shaking so badly I almost fell. Grabbing a dry kitchen towel, I reached out and pulled the kettle off the hot burner. The screaming noise died down, leaving only a soft, wet hiss in the air. I stood there, leaning my weight against the counter, my chest heaving. Where am I? I thought. My mind was racing. Am I dead? Is this what happens after your heart stops? My eyes fell on my phone, resting right next to a small ceramic mug on the kitchen island. I picked it up. The screen lit up instantly, displaying the home screen. Tuesday, July 14th. I opened the calendar app and stared at the numbers, my eyes widening as I read the year. It was 2 years ago. It wasn't the night of my death. It was exactly 2 years before it. I slowly turned my head to look at the ceramic mug on the counter. Inside, a tea bag sat in the hot water, turning the liquid a dark amber-brown color. A soft, sweet, and unmistakable smell rose from the mug. Lavender and chamomile. My stomach turned violently. A wave of pure, cold terror washed over me. It was the same tea. It was the exact same mug. I grabbed the handle, walked over to the sink, and dumped the hot water out. I watched the dark liquid swirl around the drain and disappear into the pipes. I stood there for a long time, gripping the cold edges of the sink, my knuckles turning white as I stared down into the dark metal drain. "Never again," I whispered. My voice sounded thin and small in the empty, quiet kitchen. "Never again." I pushed myself away from the sink and walked down the hallway toward the large mirror by the front door. The woman looking back at me was 28 years old. My skin was bright and healthy, with no dark circles under my eyes and no pale, ghostly color on my lips. I looked like a normal, happy woman who had her whole life ahead of her. But my mind was screaming. I had lived this. I had felt the poison, the cold kiss on my forehead, the heavy silence. It wasn't a dream. It was too real to be a nightmare. The smell of his cologne still lingered in my nose. I had been given a second chance. Or maybe I had been thrown back into the trap. Either way, I knew the timeline now. I knew that in 6 months, Colson's law firm would start handling secret bank accounts for very dangerous men. I knew that in 8 months, Adalee would start finding excuses to drop by. And I knew that in 2 years, they would decide I was a loose end that needed to be tied up. 2 years, I told my reflection. The shaking in my hand stopped, replaced by a cold, steady heat in my chest. I have 2 years to take everything from you."
The garage door began to rumble open at exactly 6 o'clock that evening. I stood by the large kitchen window, my hands resting against the cold grass. Colson's shiny black car slid into the driveway. The engine purred softly, then went completely silent. My heart hammered against my ribs. I closed my eyes, took a deep, slow breath, and forced my face to change. I practiced a small, easy smile in the window glass. I had to bury the terror and hatred deep down inside where he could never see it. The front door opened. His heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. "Hey, beautiful," Colson called out. He walked into the kitchen, looking as perfect as always. His dark hair was neatly styled. His gray suit jacket was slung over his arm, and his blue tie was already loose. He had that same warm, charming smile on his face, the exact smile he wore right before he left me to die. He walked straight to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, to scratch his face, to fight back, but I forced my body to stay perfectly still. I let him pull me close. I pressed my cheek against his shoulder and held my breath so I wouldn't have to smell his expensive cedarwood cologne. He felt so warm, and it was terrifying how safe he felt. "Are you all right?" Colson asked. He pulled back slightly, his blue eyes searching my face with gentle concern. "You're a little tense today. Your shoulders feel like rocks." "Just a bit of a headache," I lied, keeping my smile sweet. "The weather is changing. I've felt a bit off all afternoon." "You need to take care of yourself," he murmured, rubbing my shoulders. "I can't have my favorite girl getting sick. Did you make that lavender tea I got you?" Hearing him mention the tea made my blood freeze. "I did," I said, keeping my voice level. "I drank the whole cup. It was wonderful." "Good," he smiled, pressing a quick kiss to the top of my head. "I'm going to wash up. The neighbors invited us to the charity dinner at the country club tonight. We should leave in about an hour." "I'll go get ready," I said. I watched him walk up the stairs. The moment he turned to the corner, my smile died. A wave of intense sickness hit me. I ran into the guest bathroom, locked the door, and turned the faucet on high so he wouldn't hear me gasping for air. I stared into the running water. No tears. Tears were a waste of time. I washed my face with freezing water, put on my makeup, and slid into a simple black dress. I looked like a loyal, harmless wife. The country club was a wall of light and noise. The air was thick with expensive perfume, rich food, and red wine. Crystal chandeliers cast a bright glow over the wealthy crowd. Colson was in his element. He stood in the center of the ballroom, a glass of whiskey in his hand, laughing with local judges and developers. He played the perfect husband, touching my back and pulling me close so everyone could see his love. "I'm going to slip away to the restroom," I whispered to him during a break. "Don't be long, sweetheart," Colson smiled, squeezing my arm. I walked away from the crowd, but I didn't go to the restroom. I knew this night. I remembered it clearly from my past life. This was the exact night Colson and Adalee first crossed the line. In my first life, I had been too blind, too busy talking to the other wives to notice my husband disappearing for half an hour. This time, my eyes never left him. I saw him slip out beside doors, heading toward the quiet, darker wings of the club. I waited a few seconds, then followed his shadow. The loud music and laughter began to fade. I passed the private dining rooms and stepped toward the indoor pool house. It was dark inside, the water glowing with a soft, watery blue light. I moved quietly into the shadows of the tall plants lining the walls. Then I heard voices, low, breathless, urgent. I looked through the leaves toward the back doors that faced the dark golf course. And there they were. Colson had Adalee pinned against the glass door, her hands wrapped tightly around his neck, her fingers tangled in his hair. Her bright red dress stood out sharply in the dim blue light. I hate seeing you with her, Adalee whispered, her voice thick. I hate watching you pretend to love her. You know she means nothing to me, Colson murmured, his voice deep. He leaned down, pressing his lips hard against her neck. Adalee gasped. It's just a matter of time, Adalee. Just play along a little longer. I don't want to wait, she whimpered, pulling his face up to kiss him deeply. I stood frozen in the dark. Even though I knew it was coming, the sight of them together tore through my chest like jagged glass. A deep wave of heartbreak washed over me. I felt a hot tear slip down my cheek, and I had to press my hand flat against my mouth to smother a sob. I loved him. I had trusted Adalee with my deepest secrets. Watching the man I married kiss another woman with such desperate lust made me feel like I was dying all over again. The pain was physical, a heavy ache that made it hard to breathe. But as I watched Colson's hand slide up her leg, the heartbreak slowly turned to ice. The tears stopped. I stared at them through the leaves. I memorized the look on Colson's face, the raw, selfish greed. I memorized Adalee's smug, quiet smile. You think you've won, but you have no idea what is coming. I quietly backed out, slipping through the doors and returning to the bright ballroom before anyone noticed I was gone. The next morning, while Colson was at work, I sat at the kitchen table with a cheap burner phone. I had paid cash for it at a convenience store downtown. I dialed a number I had memorized from an old newspaper in my past life. The phone rang 3 times before a rough, tired voice answered. Garrett? Is this Watson Garrett? I asked, keeping my voice low. Who's asking? My name is not important, but I need to hire an investigator, someone who is quiet, fast, and doesn't ask questions. There was a brief pause. I do divorce work, background checks. What do you need? I need you to watch my husband and my neighbor. I will pay you double your normal rate, in cash, but you cannot use your personal email or your office phone to contact me. Everything goes through this number. All right, sounds like you're expecting some ugly secrets. You have no idea, I replied. I'll send you the details of a boutique hotel downtown. They will be there this Friday night, room 304. I need pictures, dates. I need everything. All right, send me the details. I'll get to work. I hung up the phone. Now came the second part of my plan. I knew that next Tuesday, Colson was scheduled to receive a massive illegal payment of $2 million from a corrupt developer he represented. In my first life, I accidentally saw a bank slip for that exact amount on his desk, which he quickly laughed off as an error. I knew the routing codes. I knew the name of the offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. I opened my laptop, logged into a secure network under a fake name, and began typing. I was going to intercept that money the second it hit his account and move it somewhere he could never reach. A small spark of hope grew in my chest. I was ahead of them. This time, I was going to win.
Friday arrived faster than I expected. The rain was tapping softly against the kitchen windows when Colson came downstairs. He was wearing his favorite dark blue suit, adjusting his silver cufflinks with a calm, practiced ease. He looked like the picture of success. I have a late meeting tonight, sweetheart, he said, walking over to kiss my cheek. His lips felt cold, just like they did in the bedroom on the night I died. Some big international developers are in town. I might not be home until after midnight. Don't worry about me, I said, offering him a warm, supportive smile. Take your time. I'll probably just read a book and go to sleep early. That's my girl, he murmured, patting my shoulder. I'll call you when I'm on my way back. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, the red taillights disappearing into the dark, rainy evening. The moment he was gone, I pulled the burner phone from its hiding spot under the floorboards in the pantry. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the blank screen, waiting. Hour after hour ticked by. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Outside, the wind began to howl, shaking the branches of the tall oak trees in our yard. I didn't turn on any lights. I sat in the dark, let the shadows wrap around me, and waited. At exactly 10:45, the burner phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Watson Garrett. There was no greeting, just a link to a private encrypted folder online. My fingers trembled as I tapped the link. The screen glowed brightly in the dark kitchen, illuminating my face. The first photo loaded. It was taken outside the boutique hotel downtown. The rain made the streetlights look like blurry halos. In the center of the frame, Colson was holding an umbrella over Adalee. He had his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. They were both laughing. I swiped to the next photo. This one was taken through the glass window of a restaurant across the street from the hotel. They were sitting at a secluded corner table. Colson was feeding her a strawberry, his eyes locked on hers with a look of pure, undivided devotion, the kind he hadn't given me in years. I swiped again. The last photo was inside the hotel lobby. They were standing near the elevator. Adalee had her head resting on his shoulder, and Colson's hand was sliding into his pocket, holding a silver room key. My chest felt tight, as if the lavender poison was flowing through my veins all over again. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on my lungs. Even though I knew this was happening, seeing the solid proof made the world feel incredibly cold. They were building their new life on the ashes of mine. I took a long, deep breath and let the pain wash away. I replaced it with the anger, the cold, calculating focus that would keep me alive. I typed a quick reply to Watson Garrett. "Is this everything?" A few seconds later, his reply popped up. "I have high-resolution videos of them entering room 304. I also have the hotel registry logs. I can get more if you need it." "This is perfect," I wrote. "Keep the files safe. Do not send them to anyone else. I will wire the second half of your payment tonight." I closed the app and turned off the phone. These photos were weapon number 1, but they were only for insurance. If I tried to divorce Colson now, using just infidelity, his powerful law firm would tie me up in court for years. He would use his wealth and his connections to paint me as unstable, just like he did in my past life. He would leave me with nothing. To truly destroy him, I had to take his power. I had to take his money. I opened my laptop and loaded the secure browser. The illegal $2 million transfer was scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 in the morning. The money was coming from a shell company in Panama, moving through a series of European banks, and ending up in a private account in the Cayman Islands. Colson thought he was a genius. He thought his digital trail was completely invisible. But he didn't know that I had spent the last 3 years of my past life watching him. I had memorized the routing numbers. I knew the exact security questions he used for the offshore account. I even knew the passwords he reused for every single financial portal. With a few quick strokes on the keyboard, I set up a redirect trap. It was a simple automated script. The moment the $2 million hit his offshore routing hub next Tuesday, the script would trigger. It would immediately flag the transaction as a high-risk security error, split the funds into 4 smaller amounts, and transfer them into 4 anonymous, untraceable crypto wallets. By the time Colson realized the money was gone, it would be scattered across the blockchain, completely untraceable. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing blue screen. For the first time in 2 lives, I felt like I was holding the cards. Colson thought he was the hunter. He thought I was just a quiet, clueless wife who made him tea and kept his house clean. He had no idea that the prey had already set the trap.
The hardest part of revenge isn't the waiting, it's the smiling. On Monday morning, the sun was bright, mocking the dark storm brewing in my chest. I stood in my kitchen, preparing a fresh pot of coffee, not tea. I had thrown every single tea bag in the house into the trash. Today, I was hosting a guest. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. My hand hesitated on the kitchen counter for just a second. I closed my eyes, let my face soften, and forced a bright, happy expression onto my face. I opened the door. "Leyla, babe," Adalee squealed, throwing her arms around me. She smelled like expensive French perfume. It was sweet, heavy, and made my stomach turn. I forced myself to hug her back, patting her shoulder with a warmth I did not feel. "Adalee, it's so good to see you," I said, pulling back with a wide smile. "Come in, I just brewed some fresh coffee." "Oh, you are a lifesaver," she said, stepping into the foyer. She was wearing a beautiful cream-colored silk blouse and designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfect blonde hair. She looked around my immaculate living room with an expression I had never noticed in my past life. It wasn't admiration, it was hunger. She wanted this life. She wanted my husband. We sat down at the kitchen island. I poured her a cup of coffee, sliding it across the marble counter. "So," Adalee began, taking a small sip, "how have you been? You looked a little quiet at the charity dinner on Friday night. I tried to find you, but Colson said you went home early with a headache." I took a slow sip of my own coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her shift in her seat. "I did," I said softly. "I felt terrible. But before I left, I actually tried to find you. I went looking around the club, near the indoor pool." Adalee paused. Her cup was halfway to her mouth. For a fraction of a second, her green eyes flared with pure, frozen panic. The colorful gloss on her lips seemed to pale. "Oh," she asked, her voice slightly higher than usual. "The pool? Why would you look for me there?" "I don't know," I said, laughing softly, waving my hand in the air. "I thought I saw a flash of a bright red dress walking that way, and you wear red so beautifully. But when I got there, it was empty, just dark water." Adalee let out a breath. Her shoulders visibly dropped. She forced a laugh. "Oh no, not me. I was in the main ballroom the entire night. You must have been seeing things." "Probably," I murmured, staring directly into her eyes. The mind plays funny tricks when you're tired. She took another sip of coffee, but her hand was shaking. The tiny clatter of her ceramic cup hitting the saucer was music to my ears. She was nervous. She was beginning to realize that the perfect invisible affair wasn't as secure as she thought. "Anyway," Adalee said, quickly trying to change the subject, "what are your plans for tomorrow? We should go shopping downtown. There's a new boutique that just opened." "Tomorrow?" I asked, tilting my head. "Oh, tomorrow is going to be a very busy day for me. I have some financial errands to run." "Financial errands?" Adalee frowned. "Since when do you handle the finances? I thought Colson did all of that." He does, I smiled, leaning in closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. But I think it's time I start taking an active interest in our future, don't you think? Adalee stared at me, trying to read my face, but I kept my expression perfectly sweet, perfectly empty. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, the $2 million her future was built on would vanish into thin air. Yes, Adalee said slowly, a fake, uneasy smile forming on her lips. I suppose that's very smart of you. I'm glad you agree, I said, patting her hand. Her skin felt cold, just like mine did when she stole my coat. Tuesday morning arrived with a clear blue sky. Colson was gone before the sun was fully up, leaving only a half-empty mug of black coffee on the kitchen counter. I sat in his home office, the curtains drawn to keep the room dim. The only light came from the blue glow of my laptop screen. The digital clock on the bottom right corner of my screen read 9:55 a.m. 5 minutes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My redirect script was fully loaded, sitting quietly in the background of Colson's offshore banking portal like a silent predator waiting in the tall grass. At 9:58 a.m., my screen flickered. A notification popped up. The shell company in Panama had just initiated the transfer. $2 million had entered the digital pipeline, bouncing through routing hubs in Zurich and London, heading straight for Colson's private account in the Cayman Islands. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stared at the progress bar of the incoming transfer. 99%? 100%. The moment the funds touched his routing hub, my script snapped shut. On the screen, lines of code began to run at lightning speed. The $2 million was instantly flagged by the system as a high-risk security routing error. To the bank's automated systems, it looked like a glitch. But behind the scenes, the money was being sliced into 4 equal transactions of $500,000. With a soft, static hum from my laptop, the funds were cast out into the digital wind, pouring directly into my 4 anonymous, secure crypto wallets. The screen blinked once. Account balance, $0. A cold, sharp laugh escaped my lips. It was gone. $2 million of dirty, illegal money vanished in less than 30 seconds. Right on cue, my personal phone on the desk began to buzz violently. The caller ID showed Colson's name. I let it ring 3 times, taking a deep breath to steady my voice before pressing answer. "Hey, honey," I said, my voice sweet and airy. "Is everything all right, Colson?" Colson gasped. He sounded completely out of breath, his voice cracking with a panic I had never heard from him in either of my lives. "Leyla, I need you to check the house. Did any mail come? Did any packages arrive from the office?" "No, nothing yet," I lied smoothly. "Why? You sound terrified, Colson. What's wrong?" "Nothing," he snapped, his voice sharp and defensive. "Just some business issues. If anyone calls the landline, or if anyone comes to the door asking for me, you tell them I am in meetings all day. Do you understand me, Leyla?" "Of course," I said, putting a touch of worry into my tone. "Colson, you're shaking. Are you safe?" "I'm fine," he barked, before slamming the phone down. I pulled the phone away from my ear and smiled. He wasn't fine. He was drowning. I shut my laptop, slid it back into its hiding spot under the floorboards, and stood up. The first pillar of his perfect life had just crumbled. Now it was time to watch the rest of it burn. Colson didn't come home until long after midnight. When he finally walked through the front door, he looked like a ghost. His tie was completely gone. His hair was messy, and his expensive gray suit jacket was wrinkled and stained with sweat. He didn't even look at me. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and drank it in one long, desperate gulp. "Colson?" I asked, softly, stepping out of the shadows of the living room. He jumped, almost dropping his glass. He spun around, his blue eyes wide and bloodshot. "What are you doing awake?" he hissed. His voice was raw. "I was worried about you," I said, keeping my voice gentle and sweet. I took a slow step toward him. "You sounded so upset on the phone. Did something happen at the office?" "It's nothing," he lied, but his hand was shaking so badly the ice clinked against the glass. "Just a technical glitch, a mistake at the bank." "A mistake?" I tilted my head, looking at him with innocent, wide eyes. "Can't they just fix it?" "No, Leyla, they can't just fix it," he muttered, his voice dropping. He immediately closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose, trying to control his rising panic. "I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. Go back to bed. I have some urgent calls to make." "Okay," I said quietly. "Don't stay up too late." I turned and walked up the stairs, but I didn't go to bed. I stood at the top of the staircase, hiding in the dark, listening. A few minutes later, I heard him dialing his phone downstairs. "We have a massive problem," Colson whispered into the receiver. His voice was trembling with pure fear. "The money is gone. It never hit the Cayman account. No, Adalee, listen to me. It's not a delay. The bank says the transaction was flagged and redirected. Someone hijacked the transfer." There was a long pause. I could hear a faint, frantic squeaking on the other end of the line. It was Adalee, panicking. "I don't know who did it," Colson hissed, slamming his hand down on the kitchen island. "But if I don't find that money soon, Arthur Vance is going to destroy me. We need to figure out our next move. We need to get out of the country before everything falls apart." I smiled in the dark hallway. The trap was closing, and they were walking right into it, completely blind. The next morning, Colson left the house before the sun was even up. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't kiss my cheek. He just slammed the front door, leaving behind a cold, empty house. I waited 30 minutes to make sure he was really gone. Then I walked into his home office. I sat at his mahogany desk. I opened his personal laptop. Because I had lived this life before, I knew his password. It was his mother's maiden name, followed by the year he graduated law school. It took me 5 seconds to log in. I began searching through his private emails and recent browser history. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Under a hidden folder in his email, there was a booking confirmation: 2 one-way first-class tickets to Switzerland. The flight was scheduled for this Friday night. One ticket was for Colson. The other ticket was for Adalee. He was planning to run away with her, using the $2 million he thought he was going to get. He was going to leave me behind to face the music when his corrupt clients realized the money was gone. "You really thought of everything," I whispered to the empty room. But there was a problem. The $2 million was gone. Colson was broke, and his most dangerous client, Arthur Vance, was going to want answers. Arthur Vance was not a man you wanted to cross. He was a ruthless billionaire developer with ties to criminal syndicates all over the world. In my past life, I remembered Colson whispering on the phone about how Arthur had made a rival lawyer disappear overnight. If Arthur Vance thought Colson had stolen his money and was planning to flee the country, Arthur would handle Colson for me. I smiled. It was time to introduce the client to the truth. I opened a new untraceable email account on my secure browser. I attached the photos Watson Garrett had taken of Colson and Adalee at the boutique hotel. Then I attached a screenshot of the 2 one-way flight tickets to Switzerland. Finally, I typed a short, simple message. "Arthur,
Your lawyer, Colson, intercepted the $2 million transfer on Tuesday morning. He has split the money into private crypto wallets. He and his mistress, Adalee, are fleeing to Switzerland this Friday night on the 9 o'clock flight. The proof is attached. I didn't sign a name. I didn't need to. I hit send. I closed the laptop, wiped down the keyboard to remove any fingerprints, and walked out of the office. The pieces were on the board. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was sit back, play the loving wife, and watch them destroy each other. By Thursday evening, the air in our house felt heavy, like the minutes before a thunderstorm. Colson was pacing the living room floor, his phone glued to his ear. He had stopped wearing his suit jackets altogether. He was in his shirt sleeves, the top 3 buttons undone, his face pale and slick with sweat. "I don't care what the server logs say," he yelled into the phone, his voice cracking with a desperate, raw edge. $2 million doesn't just evaporate into thin air. Find it. He slammed the phone down on the coffee table and put his head in his hands. I walked into the room carrying a small tray. On it was a cup of hot chamomile tea. No lavender, just plain, safe chamomile. "Colson," I said softly, keeping my voice sweet and harmless. "You look so tired, sweetheart. I made you some tea to help you relax." He snapped his head up, his blue eyes wild and bloodshot. For a second, he looked at me with pure irritation, but then he forced his face to soften. He was still trying to play the part. "Thanks, Leyla," he muttered, reaching out to take the cup. His hand was shaking so badly, the ceramic clicked against the wooden tray. I just have a lot on my mind." "Is it Arthur Vance?" I asked, tilting my head. Colson froze. The teacup stayed suspended halfway to his mouth. The silence in the room became absolute. Why would you ask that?" he whispered, as his eyes narrowed as he stared at me. "Oh, I saw his name on a document on your desk yesterday. I was just tidying up. He's your biggest client, right? I figured he must be the one causing you so much stress." Colson took a slow, shaky breath and set the cup down without drinking from it. "Yeah, he's a very demanding client, but don't worry about it. It's just legal stuff. I'm going to step outside for some fresh air." "Of course," I said, picking up the tray. "Don't stay out in the cold too long." I watched him grab his coat and hurry out the back door, heading toward the dark, manicured lawn. The moment the door clicked shut, I went to the window and watched him. He was standing near the edge of the woods, dialing his phone again. I didn't need to hear his words to know what he was saying. He was calling Adalee. He was telling her that they had to leave tomorrow, with or without the money. He was telling her that Arthur Vance was closing in and that their time had run out. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass window, watching his dark silhouette against the trees. Tomorrow was Friday, the day of their flight, the day my old life ended and my new one would finally begin. Friday morning felt like ice. Colson was gone from the house before I even opened my eyes. He left a short, hurried note on the kitchen counter. "In meetings all day. Don't wait up for dinner." I crumpled the paper, tossed it into the trash, and pulled out my laptop. The digital clock on my screen read 2 p.m. The flight to Switzerland was at 9 o'clock tonight. In exactly 7 hours, Colson and Adalee would arrive at the airport, expecting to board a plane and disappear forever. Suddenly, my personal phone buzzed on the counter. It was a restricted number. I picked it up and swiped to answer. "Hello? Leyla?" It was Adalee. Her voice was trembling so violently I could barely understand her. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet, speaking in a frantic, breathless whisper. "Leyla? Is everything okay? You sound terrified, I said, putting a layer of deep concern into my tone. Leyla, listen to me, she gasped. If Colson calls you, or if he comes home, you have to tell him to run. Arthur Vance knows. Knows what? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Adalee, you're making no sense. What does Arthur Vance know? He knows about the money, she cried softly. Someone sent him an email with all of Colson's private files. Arthur's men came to my house an hour ago. They smashed my windows, Leyla. They were looking for Colson. They said if he doesn't return the $2 million by tonight, they're going to bury us both. Oh my God, I whispered, forcing a tone of pure shock. Where is Colson now? I don't know. He's not answering his phone, Adalee sobbed. He told me last night to meet him at the private terminal at the airport at 8 o'clock, but I'm too scared to go there. Arthur's men might be watching the airport. Listen to me, Adalee, very carefully, I said, my voice turning incredibly calm and steady. Do exactly what Colson told you to do. Go to the airport. There was a sudden pause on the line. What? But what if... If you don't show up, Colson will leave you without you. And if you stay at your house, Arthur's men will come back. The airport is a public place. It's the safest place for you right now. Go to the terminal, find Colson, and get on that plane. You think so? She whispered, her breath wagged. I know so, I murmured. Go, Adalee. Save yourself. Thank you, Leyla. You're a true friend, she sniffled, before hanging up the phone. I pulled the device away from my face and let out a cold, sharp breath. A true friend. The irony was beautiful. I wasn't sending her to safety. I knew Arthur Vance, and I knew how his network worked. If an anonymous tip told him that his thief was fleeing on a 9 o'clock flight, the airport terminal would be the exact place Arthur's men would be waiting to intercept them. I packed my laptop into a small handbag, grabbed my car keys, and walked out the front door. It was time to go watch the final act. The airport's private terminal was surprisingly quiet for a Friday evening. Outside, a steady drizzle fell, blurring the runway lights into long, shimmering streaks of yellow and blue on the wet asphalt. I parked my rental car near the edge of the lot, keeping the engine running and the headlights switched off. I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the terminal's glass entrance. The digital clock on my dashboard read 8:15 p.m. Inside, through the large glass windows, I spotted Colson. He was pacing back and forth near the check-in desk, his shoulders hunched, constantly looking over his shoulder. He kept checking his watch every 10 seconds, his fingers twitching against his leather suitcase. He looked absolutely frantic. A moment later, the glass double doors slid open and Adalee rushed in. She was wearing my gray cashmere coat, the one Colson had bought for our anniversary in my past life. She had her hood pulled up, her eyes wide and bloodshot with panic. When she reached him, she grabbed his arms, her lips moving rapidly as she spoke. Colson shook his head, gesturing wildly toward the security gates. They were arguing. But their argument didn't last long. From the far end of the terminal lobby, 3 men in dark, tailored suits stepped out of the shadows near the lounge. They didn't walk fast, but their movement was deliberate, confident. It was Arthur Vance's men. I recognized the lead man, a tall, heavily built enforcer with a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. Adalee saw them first. She froze, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes widening in pure terror. She pointed toward them, stepping back. Colson spun around. The moment he saw the men, all the color drained from his face. He grabbed his suitcase and took a step toward the security doors, but the other 2 men quickly cut his path off, boxing him in. The enforcer with the scar stepped up to Colson, placing a heavy, mocking hand on his shoulder. Colson's body went completely stiff. I could see him desperately trying to talk his way out of it, his hands gesturing wildly, his lips moving in a frantic plea. But the enforcer didn't care about excuses. He whispered something in Colson's ear, his grip tightening so hard on Colson's shoulder that Colson physically winced, his knees buckling slightly. One of the other men stepped forward, smoothly taking the leather suitcase from Colson's hand. Then they turned both Colson and Adalee toward the exit. They didn't make a scene. To any casual observer in the terminal, it just looked like a wealthy couple being escorted to a private car by their personal security detail. But I knew the truth. As they walked out the sliding glass doors into the cold rain, Colson's head was bowed, his spirit completely broken. Adalee was sobbing silently, clutching my gray coat tightly around her shivering frame. The men guided them toward a waiting black SUV with tinted windows parked right at the curb. The door opened, and one by one, they were ushered inside. The doors slammed shut. The SUV slowly pulled away, its red taillights fading into the dark, rainy night, disappearing onto the highway. They were gone, and they were never coming back. I leaned back in my seat, letting out a long, slow breath. The silence inside my car was beautiful. The heavy, suffocating weight that had pressed against my chest since the moment I woke up in the kitchen was finally gone. I reached into my bag and pulled out the burner phone. I took out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces into a cup of old coffee in the console. I started the engine, shifted the car into drive, and turned on the headlights. My past was finally buried. My 2 years had just begun.